I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Marcus Garvey House. We're continuing our series of discussions on civil rights. It's the end of Black History Month. We'll be doing 2 or 3 more before we conclude this series, but we're pleased to have these, what we call robust conversations. People, luminaries, friends, neighbors, leaders, elders, and young people in our community reflecting on what civil rights means, what human rights means, what the concept means, but beyond the theoretical, beyond the conceptual, what are our personal stories, our family stories that give life and meaning to the struggle of civil rights, and how does the struggle give meaning to our individual and collective lives. This series, this program is brought to you by Comcast of the Twin Cities. We thank them for their support. And we're presenting this over Facebook Live. We're glad that you are checking in. We'll be reminding you to like us, to share this conversation with your networks, and to subscribe. We think this is important content, and we are happy to be able to use this medium to engage you, to engage each other around critical issues of the day. Well, my guests today are Tyrone Terrell and his son, Phil Terrell. Tyrone is the former director of the St. Paul Civil Rights Department. He's been a sports management consultant. He is an organizer and leader of the St. Paul Leadership Conference, St. Paul
African American Leadership Council.
African American Leadership Council, and one of the organizers of the Men of March. And that's a powerful story of brothers, men getting together to organize a Minnesota delegation to the Million Man March, but staying together for 20 years, a whole generation. Tyrone, first of all, thank you for being here, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Al, and thanks for having me. I am honored to be here, brother. As I told you earlier, it's been too long.
It's been too long, and Phil, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
So long.
I know, it's very cool. Thank you.
And so on the table is a book authored by Phil. I'm going to start with you, Phil. Name the book and let people know what this book is about real quick and how they can get it.
Sure. So the book is called Collision Course, 4 F's to Transform Life's Challenges into Powerful Breakthroughs. And the book is based on a drunk driving accident that I had back in 2014 and how I chronicled and compartmentalized the journey from, my time in Atlanta, the accident, moving to Fargo, North Dakota, which people are always like, what are you doing? All the way through my time in Seattle and to now, and how I, built a model, the 4 F's, find, focus, feed, and facts, around that story to help me transform my life into a breakthrough, which is where I'm at today.
Awesome. Well, if you're watching this, please share it. I see David Beckford is watching. David, how you doing? And share with your friends. Let people know that we're having this Facebook Live conversation right now. Tyrone Terrell, civil rights. When I throw the word out, the concept, you can start anywhere, but what comes to your mind immediately? Let me say one more thing. I love calling you because when you're not home or you're on the phone, your voicemail message is the beginning of the speech by Martin Luther King. So if I need the inspiration, I say, I hope he ain't home, and give him a call, and I get 20 bars of I Have a Dream. So thank you for doing that, first of all. What comes to your mind when you think of civil rights?
Well, I think about Dr. King, but I also think about my father, going to stores with him and to buy shoes, and he would have to say to a young white man, Mr. Bob. And I'd stop and say, Daddy, don't call him Mr. Bob, call him Bob. Mm-hmm. He'd say, son, I got to call him Mr. Bob. I said, Dad, no, not anymore. We don't do Mr. Bob anymore. But my dad grew up in an era where black people had to, regardless if it's a 15-year-old white boy, call him Mr. And so I go from there to the night Walter Cronkite came on TV crying, saying that Martin Luther King Jr. had been killed in Memphis. And my mother told me I sat there in front of the TV for 2 or 3 hours crying.
Where were you then?
Kansas City, Missouri, asking her, why did they kill the dreamer? Why would they kill a man that was fighting to make America great? Why would they kill a man who was fighting to give black people and all people the right to live where you want to live, go to school where you want to go, get a job, take care of your family, and to make America great? If you remove 4 or 5 things from America's history, America could be a great country. if the Pilgrims had came here and treated Native Americans right, country would have been better. If there had never been slavery, America would have been better. Remove the civil rights Jim Crow era and Jim Crow Jr. and Jim Crow III, America would have been great. And so there's just different things, 4 or 5 things in American history. If we had treated people right, we'd have a much greater country. And so I decided at that point in time to dedicate my life to Martin, to his dream, to his vision that he wanted everybody to be treated right. And most people don't, he only had 13 years, not 40 or 50. So he went from 26 to 39 and gave his life for not just black people, but all people. And we, even as black people, forget about that. We don't celebrate or love Martin in the manner that we should. And that's something I try to do with my children, my grandchildren. Anybody come, if you come in my house, Dr. King gonna look at you right away.
He's everywhere.
He's everywhere, including the bathroom. And even the voice recording, when people teased me about it over the years, my mom even told me she called Dr. King's house and Coretta wasn't home, and even Coretta didn't have it on her answering machine. But I said, Mama, I do it to make sure they don't forget my dreamer. That when you call me for 30, and I've had people complain about it, but I want you to remember Martin for 30 seconds. You don't even get me first, you get Martin first. You don't even get to talk to me or leave my message. So that's what that was about for me, and it's been that way from the old answering machine. I had it on there. I had it playing in the lobby of the Civil Rights Department for my 14 years in that building. And it stays on my phone, and until I'm gone, it's going to be on there.
It'll be there. Listen, Tyrone, thank you for being here again. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. We're webcasting live from the Marcus Garvey House in North Minneapolis. We're continuing our series on the civil rights movement. And Tyrone Terrell is a person that is undeniably one of the leaders of the movement in our generation and in our community. And I say that with just complete and total conviction because you've been focused from the time I knew you on being an advocate and challenging anybody and everybody, our people and their people, when it comes to understanding dignity, the law, fairness, and equity. Where does that come from? Take a minute or two, Tyrone Terrell, and talk about your parents and your parents' parents. Because I asked my guests, what has poured into you to make you the spirit and the human and the body that you are today?
Well, I think it comes from my great-grandparents. My mother often would tell me that my generation, meaning me, was the only generation that wasn't a preacher. That her daddy was a preacher, her daddy's daddy was a preacher, all of them, so we've come from preachers.
Where are y'all from?
From Kansas City and also Central Missouri, Columbia and all throughout there, Moberly, all. So we're all over Missouri, but also Alabama. And so our family has been deeply rooted. And the preacher, as you know, Al, the civil rights movement came from the church. The real leaders of the community has always been the black church. It is still the black church. I go to the Black Ministerial Alliance meeting in St. Paul. Out of 12 meetings a year, I go to 6 of them, just to be around the black preachers and stay connected to that leadership. And so it really comes from my family in terms of preachers, but then also my mother was a strong woman. My mother was unbelievably strong as a mother in terms of putting that inner strength in us as young children, but then she also gave it to my children. I mean, my children knew without question that their grandmother was strong. And my dad didn't talk a lot. He laughed because he just called him boy. He never called him by his name. He would just say, "Get that boy something." But it came from that preaching. It came from that religious foundation. And what's really funny, my grandmother is a Lee. My great-grandfather was a Grant.
Two big Southern names.
Right, and so then they married. And so it goes from Grant Lee to Grant, but it continues. The legacy of our family in terms of preachers. And I always laugh, and Clarence Hightower invited me about a year or two ago to do Black History Month in his church. And I had planned to do a normal talk about Black history and all the great events. And, brother, I sat in that pulpit and got cold. Next thing I knew, brother, I'm in the pulpit, I'm crying. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on. My mom had two favorite songs, Precious Lord, and I'm going to blank on the other, but she loved these songs. And when the church started to sing Precious Lord,
Those memories.
but it was like I had a 10-page little thing, but I tossed it on the floor. Didn't even need it. It's almost like my mother came and sat with me. And so I just know that preaching thing, and that's the only time I've ever done that, ever. But it's in me, it's in our family, it's in my sons, in my daughter, because it comes from our family. And so you learn to respect what's right. And I tell people all the time, when you do this work in terms of direct action, Dr. King had 4 things you had to always do. That it couldn't be for anything personal, vendetta, personal gain. So you had to be real clear on that. You had to be sure of you've exhausted all means of mediation, negotiation, and conciliation. So can you resolve a problem? Most people say, well, you're on TV, you're in the newspaper. I turn down more TV interviews than I ever do. Because a lot of times you don't need to do that. But there are certain times that the public needs to know. But third, are you prepared to suffer the consequences of your actions? Lose your job, have people in the community talk about you. And one thing Dr. King talked about, he was under constant criticism, even from Negroes. So, but if you're doing God's work, then, and you're doing it for just reasons and causes, then you're going to be okay. And the 4th thing has always been, make sure you're not getting anybody harmed. You tell somebody to close a store, do you have a job for those people? When you say lay them off, do you have employment to help them take care of their family? So you have to be real conscious.
Those are all the requirements for direct action.
Yes.
Direct action, right.
If you're going to do direct action, then I always ask myself those 4 questions before I do anything. Once I do that, brother, I move on. And I'm prepared to suffer those consequences.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, a live webcast from the Marcus Garvey House in North Minneapolis. Glad to have Tyrone Terrell, a senior elder leader in our community, and his son, Phil Terrell. And what I like about this setting right now, Tyrone and Phil, is that Phil, your presence makes this an intergenerational conversation. Yeah. So, Phil, I want you to jump in, own part of this conversation, because I'm curious as to how looking at your dad and his description of his dad and his grands flow into you. And what then you, Phil, would say is your purpose, your mission. If I ask you, Phil, who are you? What's your answer?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it actually echoes a conversation I just had about Black History Month. And somebody, the narrator, asked me, like, who was my hero, kind of question to dive a little bit deeper into my background. And it was around the concept of civil rights, and then what that is and what it means to, like, my generation. And my answer, without, like, hesitation, was my dad. Right, because a lot of people will say, like, they will say somebody like a Martin or Malcolm, and if you really know things, like, for me, I might say like Fred Hampton or some of these, like, other generational figures that I gravitated to based on the work they've done. However, for me, like, when you ask, like, who am I, what makes my makeup, it comes with, like, my dad, right? Because oftentimes, like, in my answer to that person was, look, I looked at somebody like my dad, and he laid down, like, everything every day for the betterment of the community, right? So when you have somebody around you that puts self before, puts the community before themselves, you start to understand what type of person you are being raised by, and especially as the lone son, right? you also get an appreciation for what manhood means, and then beyond that, what it's like to be a black man. And for me, it's a little deeper because I'm in corporate America, right? So the construct of the system, I have it in a different way every day. And being in places of leadership at, a top Fortune 50 tech company, one of the best in the world, I just embrace and endure different things, but I go back to some of the things I've seen my dad do, some of the battles he's fought in the community. I felt the reverberations of the negativity that, people will mail to our home, or whatever that is, right? And so you become built a different way. So when you ask me, like, who am I? I'm not probably the typical 28-year-old that walks around St. Paul or the Twin Cities or the world. I have a different appreciation for my community, how I interact with people. And, when I think about my assignment, like even, some of the things that my dad has done and just the risks, right? Like, so I look at the book, for example, and my assignment was to tell the truth, which people don't like to do. What I've seen is this ability to be vulnerable in the pursuit of justice, right? And so for me, it was, can you be vulnerable in the pursuit of telling the truth to save other people's lives based on the experience you had? So that's kind of how I've started to not just embrace who I am, but also understand, the legacy that I come from. And then I look back at my granddad. I didn't have a chance to meet my great-grandparents. But my granddad, we had a unique relationship. So you talk about, like, intergenerational, like, I had a different type of experience than most would with their grandparent. Like my grandfather, Jim Fuller, like he still lives in North Minneapolis. But when I talk about my dad's dad, it's a different type of relationship where he had that like hard, to like the generational time period. Like it's very hard, right? You would never know, like, does he love me? Like, like I can't tell. But you also knew like he did, right? And I think a lot of that came from, look, I'm just showing you guys what it's like to work hard. Right, to be a man, to lead your family through the actions versus maybe the words. And I saw like the 30 plus years on the railroad, like I remember like his hands, like I don't know if you've ever shaken somebody's hand or touched somebody's hand where it's like you can tell they worked. And it's like years, decades of work I felt. And so it just gives me the appreciation for like working hard and staying who you are in the process, which is the piece I take from both my dad and my grandfather. Yeah.
I know your granddad and your great granddad on your mom's side.
Yeah, my mom's side. Yeah,
and
most people probably know that.
On that side, you come from the master class.
Yeah.
Your great granddad and your dad, brilliant, powerful, focused, and committed human beings and towers in our community. So we call it coming from good stock.
Yeah.
And you certainly do, and I think we have to claim that and own that. I want to thank Oba Adekunle Asamu Oyeyemi for watching the show. And brother, thank you for being a part of this webcast. And those others who are there, if you're watching this, share it. Like what you're hearing. If you like this kind of content, we're creating content with you in mind, with us in mind, and for sure, subscribe to this so that we can stay connected. We want to do that. I'm Al McFarlane. We're at the Marcus Garvey House in North Minneapolis. Tyrone Terrell, talk about the challenges, your civil rights stories. Think about the earliest event that you did in your life that you look back on now and say was a defining moment or one of the early defining moments in your work that stands as evidence that you came to the table or came to the arena, that you stood and you made a statement about civil rights.
Don't talk about the Easter Bunny.
No, I'm not.
Don't talk about what? I missed that.
The famed Easter Bunny that I canceled Easter.
You canceled Easter.
Yeah. But I would always go back to the University of Minnesota when my good friend Spike Moss, who, as I tell people all the time, when you go into a trench to do anything, there's certain people you want in that trench with you that you know will not leave the trench, even if it means death. And Spike has always been that person for me. We've been inseparable, and most people know that. So I remember us, the story when The Gopher basketball team played in Wisconsin, won the game. 3 players get accused of rape. Jim Dutcher resigns. There's chaos throughout the city of Minneapolis, city of St. Paul, the country. We insisted that Jimmy Williams, at that time the black assistant coach, become the head coach. Reached out to President Keller, asked for that to happen. Jimmy was made interim coach, but then they decided not to hire Jimmy. We had a large meeting at Phil's Weekly, 50, 60 black leaders in the room. And we said, well, we have this letter we want to send to the University of Minnesota, and out of 60 people there, 58 voted the letter down. Said, don't send it. Spike stood up, and I counted to 5 like I used to do. We work before he hits the table. And Spike almost split the table in half and said, me and Tyrone going to send it anyway. And we did. We sent it to 100 Gopher basketball players, saying this is a plantation, this is slavery, don't come here. And families start saying not coming. And I was with Willie Burton just 2 weeks ago, and Willie was telling people the story at a local establishment that he's on his couch in Detroit, and Spike Moss and Tyrone Terrell are on there saying, Willie Burton, Melvin Newbern, don't come to Minnesota. And President Keller said, please don't send no more. I said, well, brother, then you hire a black coach. They said, no, we're going to hire Danny DeVoe from Tennessee. I said, President Keller, here's my next 100 letters with stamps already on them. They then go to Temple University and offer the job to John Chaney. Bill Cosby stepped in and gave him a $2 million endowment to stay. They leave there and go to Albany State to a man named Hickey to offer him the job, but the school was too small to hire him. They take the hiring team to Western Kentucky, offered to Clem Haskins. Clem Haskins becomes a Gopher basketball coach. Now, most folks would never give Spike Moss or me any credit for that, but without Spike Moss and me, there's never a Clem Haskins.
Wouldn't have happened, yeah.
And
no Tubby after that.
And so it started really with that, but it also started, brother, and I give a lot of credit to Mahmoud El-Kati. I give it to Mother Bernadette Anderson, Mother Liz Samuels, because many times, brother, me and Spike may have been the one on TV, but brother, at North Commons, as you know, brother, a lot of meetings took place there. I told you just the other day, your conversation with Al McFarlane at Lucille's Kitchen was an amazing thing that we used to do there, where the community came together and talked and shared things. And so that would be the one, brother, that stands with me all the time, is me and Spike doing that, or when they were dealing in 94. And people say, boy, you really are old. But they was putting 94 through North Minneapolis. And Spike said, let's lay down in front of the bulldozer. I said, well, Spike, the bulldozer ain't stopping. Spike said, don't you move. But, so just stuff like that, brother. That's why I laugh sometimes when people talk about they're tired doing this work. You can never get tired doing this. And I should probably apologize to my children sometimes, because no matter if you're having dinner, people come up to the table, they can I just talk to you for a minute. A minute turns into 45.
Sure.
When your phone rings, you know it's somebody. But I signed up for this, and I cheated my children. I cheated my family. But I look at Martin. How many school concerts did he miss? How many family dinners did he miss? And, brother, he took a bullet that left a hole in his neck so big I could put my fist in it for us to be able to sit and even have this radio show.
Right.
And so for people to understand the real fight for civil and human rights, and not just Martin, forgotten man, Medgar Evers, killed in his driveway with his 4 children and wife looking out the window. And so there's the countless folks. I think about a white woman named Viola Louisa from Michigan. that she gets killed in Mississippi, how does she tell her husband and 5 children, I'm leaving y'all to go to Mississippi and drive for the freedom workers? She's a white woman, 5 kids, a husband, a labor leader. But she leaves her family because her conviction was so great for freedom.
And she dies.
And she
Killed.
dies.
She's murdered.
Murdered.
Mhm.
And so there are the Martin Luther Kings who get the publicity, and rightfully should. But there are many, many, many that sat in lunch counters, marked little children who had dogs put on them,
Hoses.
hoses.
Yep.
And bro, I remember one of the first things I ever saw in Minneapolis when I came here was downtown on Hennepin, when they put that dog on that 7-year-old little boy. You remember that was on the front page?
That's when, same when Brian was there with the same incident with Brian Heron.
No, it was way
Different
before.
that.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was. But it was in front of a Marcy's Big Boy restaurant. I'll never forget
Okay.
it. That they put a dog on a 7-year-old little boy. And so it's been those kind of things that they actually energize people. I tell people all the time, they actually energize me. Even the one that we just dealt with in St. Paul.
Talk about that for a second. You called a couple of days ago to say you're holding a press conference with the sheriff and undersheriff of Ramsey County because information had emerged about the brutal treatment of a resident of St. Paul some 3 years earlier. It had been suppressed, but now the film video of the incident was available and was being presented on television, and you demanded that we pay attention. Talk about that.
Well, it was important to talk about it because, one, it was 3 years ago. But it was important to talk about it from the point of a black man was attacked by 6 officers. And really only one did the kicking, the hitting, and the punching. But the lead sergeant did nothing. The other 4 officers did nothing. But the good thing is one of them was actually videotaping it. So if it hadn't been for one of those officers, we would have never known because he videotaped it and then actually later complained. But most people understand the police, it's a paramilitary organization. So if there's a sergeant there, unless the sergeant says do it, you don't do it. But it came to light, we thought it was extremely important that our current sheriff, Bob Fletcher, and particularly Under Sheriff William Corky Finney, the former St. Paul chief of police, and a longtime friend of mine, not get blamed for something that was not on their watch. But our demand, and still is on the table, those 4 officers would never work in that jail again. Because it's 3 years old, under employment law, labor law, it's tough to really discipline them. But they will be dealt with in terms of they won't work that jail again. And a whole new team led by Brother McKinney will now lead the jail. So some things are being done to hopefully not have this happen again. We're also making them add to their complaint form to anybody that's in the jail. The African American Leadership Council will be added. The St. Paul branch of the NAACP will be added, as will the St. Paul.
As resources.
Right. So if you get out of jail and you don't want to talk to the police, you can call the AALC hotline. And myself or somebody will get back to you right away. But we have to make sure it doesn't ever happen again. And he could have been easily killed. This man was in no threat to any of those officers. And we've asked the FBI to come in and take a look at this case, to look and see if it was egregious enough in terms of the human rights violations to bring charges against the officer.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, our special series of conversations on civil rights, human rights in our community. My guest, Tyrone Terrell, former director of the St. Paul Civil Rights Department, and his son, Phillip Terrell. And Tyrone has also led the St. Paul Leadership, I keep saying the name wrong.
African American Leadership Council.
Thank you, Tyrone. African American Leadership Council. But you also, Tyrone, were one of the principals in organizing the Minnesota delegation of the March on Washington. And I want to close with reflections on that because you obviously, in our community, was obviously so impacted that you convened the Men of March. March stands for Men Responsible for Cultivating Hope, right?
Yes, sir.
You convened that group of men for almost, 30 years now?
This will be our 25th year.
25th year. Talk about the March on Washington, what it meant, how the Minnesota group assembled itself, and what you feel has been created as an ongoing living legacy.
Well, we came together, actually, Al, if you remember, in February of '94, when Qubilah Shabazz,
That's right.
the daughter of Malcolm X, was on trial for an alleged plot to kill Minister Louis Farrakhan. We took 100 black men down to the courthouse and shut it down. And the federal marshals were coming from everywhere talking about how do we get them out of here. I said, well, they don't move till I tell them to move, so they're not moving. And we went there to support that sister. And from there, we started planning for the Million Man March in Randy Statton's office on 1700 Penn, where we came together with Spike, Keith Ellison, James Muhammad, and Yusuf Mgini, and created the name March. We had a second name, but March just fit because we were going to the Million Man March. And men are responsible for cultivating hope. The man is still the lead of the family. The man still has to take his rightful place in the home, not over the wife or the woman, but in partnership. And if we do that, we have a strong and better community. And then we plan to go to the march. And the ironic thing is, the march was in '95, but most people don't know that when me and Spike were doing the 10 gang summits, and we did the one here in 1993, Mr. Farrakhan said to Spike, if you can bring over 10,000 black men to St. Paul, I'm going to bring 1 million to D.C. So the birth of the Million Man March
Right here.
actually took place at Mount Olivet Baptist Church, actually in a hotel in Bloomington, Minnesota. And so Spike ended up even being our national representative for the Million Man March in terms of getting brothers registered and organized to go. And I think about that because this guy cried and held my leg when I was going out the door because he said he's with the Men of March. He comes to the meetings every Saturday. Why can't he go?
Right.
But because of the potential danger, I couldn't take a 5 or 6-year-old to the march.
On the bus, yeah.
On a bus.
Yeah.
And, brother, I came real close to taking it because he was that energetic about going, but just the thought and fear of what could happen where I wouldn't be able to take care of the men and protect my son.
Talk about what did happen. It was a glorious day.
Brother, we actually were told it was going to pour down rain and that we had brothers buy ponchos and backpacks to be ready for the rain. And we get to D.C., we come up out the tunnel from the subway, and brother, it's the most, I tell people, next to the birth of my children, the greatest day of my life, to come out of that tunnel and blue skies. And brother, we came out of there 1,000 deep. It opened up like the sea. We had these black jackets on and berets, so they was like, let these brothers up. And it was just amazing. But even the bus ride, and I wish Spike Lee's movie, Get on the Bus, had been videoed on our buses because it showed true brotherhood and love. Bro, I didn't want to get off the bus. I was going to fly. And Spike said, brother, you can't leave me. We got to do this together. And bro, I am so happy that I didn't fly because the bus ride, it seemed like it was a 3-hour bus ride. It was 22.
24 hours.
24 hours. Yeah. But the bus ride and the level of 75, 80 brothers on the bus, not one incident. And so it is still to get black people to understand how great when 2 million black men came together, not one argument. I saw an older black man drop his wallet and $20 bills. Every brother was grabbing them, taking them back to him. I mean, just unbelievable. So that Day of Atonement, the Holy Day of Atonement, where the black man stood up and said, I'm sorry to America. I'm talking about black America, and particularly to our women and children to come back and be better men. And the Men of March have done that not only with us individually, but by working with single moms who bring their boys to us, to help raise them to be better men. And what's amazing now is to have my son, Akil Faluke, and other young brothers who went through the early junior march program. They are now teaching young brothers. And they're telling young brothers about the journey. And so hopefully, long after I'm gone, they'll run it and keep doing another 25 years from now, that we will still reach out. Because the biggest problem in our community, and I was in Rush City Prison a week ago, 500 young black men in there. Brother, ripped my soul from me. But you know what I told them, brother? 50% of them being in here is their fault. The other 50% is the village. Because nobody comes out of their mother's womb with a pistol in their hand.
That's right.
That the village, whether it's the young brother or the young teenage mother, the village didn't do their part. He's 28 years old. There were 15 brothers and they're 20 on the front row. I could flip-flop him and them, and they could be sitting here talking about their book, working for Microsoft, and I consider him, he's mine, the best son in the world. I get no greater enjoyment, brother, and nothing I do than hanging out with this guy right here. And you know what? Al, he know it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Try to be like me.
There we go. There we go.
But the community has to take responsibility. So I don't care if it's Stillwater, Shakopee. Brother, me and Spike used to do a group in Shakopee. There was not even a fence around that prison. They got a fence now. And when me and Spike first started going to Shakopee, there was 10, 15 black women.
Now it's mostly black, I'm sure.
200 or 300.
Yeah.
Again, the village has failed. And one thing I told our superintendent in St. Paul, and I'm saying it to the community, there is no achievement gap. They say, hold up, brother, what do you mean? There is no achievement gap. The gap is one that's economic, it's social, it's political, it's spiritual, no religion, no character, no morality. When you remove all those, then you have a gangbanger. You give them all that, and they say, well, the poverty piece, well, no, we had slavery with no money, but we had culture, we had religion, spirituality, respect.
You had a vision.
We had a vision.
Freedom. Freedom was the goal.
Right. So even through the civil rights movement, we didn't have no money, but the black church was strong. The black community was strong. Two things killed our country for black people. Brown versus Board of Education. Because integration means you want to become white. Integration means you got rid of the black school, went to the white school. The black restaurant. In fact, you'd be a millionaire, brother, before Brown versus Board of Education. Then the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now you can go in the white restaurant, the black restaurant's closed. Go to the black funeral home, closed, go to the white one. So, and I don't blame the architects of the civil rights movement because they knew what they were doing at that time. But they didn't look at the economic impact of integration, the social impact of integration, the political impact of integration. And so those things impact us daily. And we just did it, I just did a little 20, I'm going to email it to you, Black History test. Black folk can't pass it. 20 questions. Because we don't talk about our history. Brother, everything we have in this house, light bulb, refrigerator, all came from black people. But we don't want to tell our children they come from greatness. We teach them how to rap, how to dance. We do all that. These babies are smart. It depends on what you want to teach them.
So let me close with this. Phil, jump in.
Yeah.
Your father's laid out sort of a dire situation on the one hand, but I know beneath that is this unquenchable faith and belief in our the righteousness of our people and of our cause.
Yeah.
And as he has described impediments that are internal and external, what do you see as the path ahead? Your generation, what's the vision from where you stand?
Yeah, from my perspective, and I think my generation is starting to, again, like, to feel some of that, right? Of we did maybe, I'm going to say it this way, with positive intent, right? Is maybe we did do ourselves a disservice through integration, and I think I understand that at theoretical and conceptual level because of my connection to him. But at the same time, like, the path forward means, like, okay, now that the decisions of our predecessors have been established, right? They're complete. And now we have to take those decisions and make a new path forward, which, I think our generation, all the technology, all the resources, all the education, we have to get away from, I have to be like my, counterparts, right? And take that information, the resources, our community, and go, okay, we need to just invest in ourselves again, right? Mm-hmm. Which, and I'm put it this way, like, I'm a firm believer, like, I love certain brands, I love certain things, but I also, in our generation, we also need to be able to love our other brands that we created, other businesses that we built, right? And kind of get back to, like, Tulsa, Oklahoma, right, where that was taken from us, but we can do it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the mentality is that we know that the North Star is we need to have our own again. It's just we need our people, our generation especially, to say, yes, I want that, and to actually take action against it versus talking about it. I think the times of talking are done.
So let me tell you, and I'll add my 2 cents here, where I see this going, and it builds on what both Tyrone has said and what you are saying. I think the limits mm-hmm. that we experience, whatever they are, we have to recognize that they are all artificial.
Correct.
And that, Tyrone, when you and I grew up in Kansas City, our parents told us that, so we're 5 or 6 years old. I'm on 28th in Brooklyn. You can go to the alley. You can go to the end of 29th Street. You can't cross 28th Street. This is your block. This is your world, right?
Yeah.
So now, Al McFarlane and Phillip and Tyrone, the whole world is my neighborhood.
Yeah.
The planet belongs to me. Mm-hmm. And I believe that where we are now is to recognize, or at a point of recognition, that our presence is indeed both global and local. That where we are is a part of the global reality, and we are at that table, and the decisions we make, the relationships we create, the businesses we create mm-hmm. can and will serve our people and serve humanity and serve with profitability. Agreed. That's what I think.
Totally.
And
I agree.
I see you all being connected and able to do it. I see you being fearless mm-hmm. and confident and totally unrestrained, except for the restraint of accountability, responsibility, and morality. Those things will guide you. Righteousness.
Yes.
That's what I think. Gentlemen, we're out of time.
Thank you.
Longer than I intended, but a great conversation.
Thank you.
Tyrone Terrell.
No, thank you, brother.
Phillip Terrell.
Thank you, sir.
Conversations with Al McFarlane. We're going to keep doing this. If you like this content, I see John March is watching. John, how you doing? Carol Aspman and even Chuck Slocum. Thank you for checking us out, Chuck Slocum. Roger Lear, Lane Bellamy. Share this information. Like what we're doing here, like this conversation, and share it. Also, follow this or sign up for it so that you can be part of this as we move down the road. Also, to experience interviews with civil rights leaders from Minnesota and across our country, visit Comcast's Voices of the Civil Rights Movement platform. It's available for free at civrightsvoices.com. civrightsvoices.com. We'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's guest is going to be another powerful young leader, Leslie Redmond. She's head of the Minneapolis NACP, but she's motivated and driven, and I think, like Phillip, she's what we have been waiting for, Tyrone, mm-hmm. and I think that what's down the path is phenomenal and mighty. I'm happy.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.